Because if you're right here, so you don't have to spend
45, 50, but you still love it, enjoy it, 100% like you start that thing.
No press release, no handshakes, no co-branded gloves or choreographed hype. Just a sudden jolt, 30 seconds of uncut footage, uploaded without warning. A flash of fists cutting the air with a crackle of gunshots. And there he was, Manny Pacquiao, age 46, moving like he'd never left. No announcement, no opponent named, no hint of a comeback, yet the video said everything without a word. It didn't beg for attention, it seized it. Because when Manny sharpens steel, the boxing world doesn't need context, it just listens, whether it's ready or not. And that's when the silence became deafening. Fans lit up comment sections like wildfire. Analysts dissected the footage, frame by frame. Former champs saluted with emojis that screamed louder than headlines. But through all the noise, one name hovered just out of reach: Canelo Alvarez. Not because Manny tagged him, not because the video hinted at him, but because when a legend moves like that at 46, every champion feels the shift, especially the king. Canelo said nothing, posted nothing. But something unmistakable cracked beneath the surface. And in this sport, the unsaid often echoes the loudest. Canelo Alvarez doesn't flinch easily. His career is a symphony of silence, of control, of cold-eyed patience. He's endured press conference chaos, loudmouth rivals, and keyboard warriors, all without raising his voice. But this was different. Manny's training clip wasn't noise, it wasn't hype, it was a broadcast of hunger, raw and unfiltered. What Canelo saw wasn't nostalgia, it was a threat with rhythm. That footwork, the timing, the way Pacquiao talked each pivot like the clock was lying. It wasn't a comeback, it was a message. And Canelo, he understood every syllable.
Red, official weight 145, 3/4 pounds. His professional record, 50 victories, including 38 knockouts.
That's why it felt personal without a single word. For a fighter like Canelo, who trains at altitude and breathes obsession, seeing a 46-year-old savage the myths like they owed him something doesn't feel like tribute. It feels like pressure. The kind that haunts even the most focused warriors. The kind you can't unsee. Whether Canelo acknowledged it or not didn't matter because the arena already knew. Whispers turned into side eyes, respect blurred into reflection. The silence between eras suddenly sounded less like distance and more like awe.
Encouraged by Manny Pacquiao in this fourth round, under a minute left. And there Pacquiao lands the combination.
Boxing lives on noise, quotes after punches, call-outs after wins. But Canelo's silence, it wasn't hollow, it was loaded. There was no beef, no press tour, just the man still slicing through the myths of age like they were made of paper. Pacquiao didn't look fast for his age, he looked fast, period. His fists didn't flicker like a memory. They tore forward like a warning. For every fighter chasing legacy, it was a gut punch. Some legends don't retire, they become atmosphere. Canelo, the sport's current measuring stick, suddenly faced something without a title or ranking, just raw presence. Watching Manny throw fire like it was 2009 wasn't fantasy matchmaking. It was soul-checking. Who still lives this life, who still bleeds for it at dawn. Even if Canelo said nothing, even if his team stayed invisible, every fan felt it. Because when Manny reappeared, Canelo's silence wasn't quiet, it was seismic. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels heavy. And when a reigning champion like Canelo Alvarez doesn't respond to something the whole sport is losing sleep over, it doesn't scream indifference, it whispers calculation, like he's watching the clip again and again. Not because he's shaken, but because he sees something deeper, something the casual eye misses. What Pacquiao showed wasn't flash, it was timing, flow, a rhythm that doesn't come from habit, it comes from obsession. For a fighter like Canelo, who's built his legacy on control and precision, seeing a 46-year-old unleash with that kind of reckless rhythm doesn't just ignite rivalry, it awakens memory. A memory of the fight before the fame, the movement before the marketing. Maybe Canelo didn't post because there was nothing to say. Maybe his response was in the discipline he poured into his next morning run, a quiet salute. One only warriors could decode, because Pacquiao's clip wasn't a call-out, it was a challenge to the very soul of the sport. And in that pause, in that silence, Canelo may have spoken louder than anyone.
Insane 10-punch combo.
Up, goes to the flurry again. Up. Goes to the blurred.
And that's what fans couldn't shake. It wasn't what Canelo said it was, what he didn't. The man who normally steers the sports spotlight, who headlines with a whisper, was suddenly a background presence, not because he slipped, not because he fell, but because a ghost from another era stepped in and reminded everyone what hunger really looks like. Not the kind written into contracts, the kind born in sweat, in silence, in fire. When that type, what energy hits the timeline, it doesn't trend, it transmits. Canelo has dominated headlines for a decade, but for a moment he was cast in shadow. Pacquiao didn't have to say his name. The question still hit. Could Canelo move like that at 46? Would he even try? Did he choose silence not from pride, but from reflection? Because when a man fights with nothing to prove, it forces you to question why you fight at all. Fans weren't craving conflict between Manny and Canelo, they were hunting for evidence. Evidence that the heart still beats at the top. And in the absence of words, they found something more powerful. Canelo, listening, watching, learning, because even legends recognize when another walks into the room. Strangely, that's what made it all feel even more real. There was no official tie between them, no confirmed workout, no behind-the-scenes footage, just questions, just speculation, and a storm of fans threading theories into timelines trying to make sense of what had already shaken the sport. Pacquiao didn't need to train with Canelo, he trained loud enough for him, loud enough for the whole sport to hear. It wasn't about legacy or records, it was about rhythm, grit, sweat, and when a man at 46 sends tremors through boxing with just 30 seconds of movement, it's more than nostalgia. It's a signal, a disruption, and whether he liked it or not, Canelo was swept into it. Because today's boxing culture thrives on bravado, call-outs, soundbites, viral chaos, but he reminded the world of the real ingredients: timing, intensity, silence, suffering. Without saying a word, he challenged every top fighter to look in the mirror. So when fans imagined what Canelo might have whispered behind closed doors, they weren't looking for a headline, they were chasing the truth behind his stillness. Maybe he just said damn, maybe he said nothing, but the fact that people still wonder, that's proof Manny hit the nerve he aimed for. Boxing doesn't always need a hype machine. Sometimes, the work is the headline, and that's exactly what unfolded here. Manny Pacquiao didn't look like a former icon keeping loose. He looked like a threat, like time itself was chasing him, and he was daring it to keep up. And that feeling didn't just strike fans, it hit fighters in the gut. Canelo Alvarez has been the blueprint for years, the standard everyone measures against. But suddenly, someone smaller, older, and supposedly done reminded the world what real standards used to look like when champions were built in silence, in empty gyms, when no one was filming. That's not easy to ignore, not even for a warrior like Canelo. Maybe his silence wasn't fear, maybe it was respect. Or maybe, deep down, it was a reset. Because when you see someone training that hard without a single camera in mind, not for attention but for truth, it forces every fighter to reevaluate what matters. Titles, money. None of it holds weight if the love for the grind is gone. And that's what Manny put on film, not effort, but devotion. That's why the world turned to Canelo. Because when a 46-year-old moves like that, he doesn't need to tag you to get inside your head. What made it unforgettable was its simplicity. No callouts, no cameras in the gym corner. Just a raw moment that sliced through the noise like a blade through still water. Manny Pacquiao didn't need to announce anything. He didn't tease a return. He didn't bait a rival. He trained. 30 seconds of uninterrupted purpose. And that was enough to jolt the sport awake. Because greatness doesn't always roar. It appears, it glides across the canvas, breathing rhythm into muscle memory. And when it does, every current champion feels it in their bones, not as a threat, but as a reckoning. Canelo Alvarez has always been the consummate professional. His power never came from words, it came from the ring. But even that iron discipline got tested when Pacquiao stepped back into the light, not with flair, but with movement. And that's what shook the room. Whether Canelo ever responds or not no longer matters. Because the standard didn't get raised, it reverted back to when boxing was blood and breath. When the echo of gloves was louder than a press quote. In that echo, even the brightest star paused. Because real fighters know the sound of legacy when it walks in and keeps punching.
I'm gonna let him loose in another round.
Round 10?
Round 10 or 11.
And legacy isn't built on title, Belts alone, it's forged in the quiet moments when the cameras stop rolling but the work never does. That's what Manny Pacquiao showed. No flash, no crowd, no entourage, just raw discipline and relentless rhythm. And that's the part Canelo Alvarez couldn't eclipse, not with hardware, not with pay-per-view stats, not even with his pound-for-pound pedigree. The moment that clip surfaced, it rewired the conversation. It wasn't about status, it was about obsession, the kind that doesn't need a stage. Just a bag, a pair of gloves, and the will to sweat. Whether Canelo viewed it as a challenge, a tribute, or a quiet spark, one thing became unshakable. He felt it, because when you're the face of boxing, you know a storm when you see one, and Pacquiao didn't bring a breeze. He brought thunder. In that second, Canelo stopped being the headline and became the mirror. Fans didn't ask what video meant for his own future, they asked what it said about Canelo's present. That's not marketing, that's gravity. And Manny, whether he meant to or not, reminded everyone that even from retirement, his orbit still pulls giants into its tide. For Canelo, being drawn into someone else's gravity, that's a rarity. He's used to setting the tempo, he calls the plays, starts the noise, ends it when he chooses. But this time, the script flipped. He wasn't the engine, he was the echo, and that haunted people, because Manny didn't throw a punch, make a speech, or launch a comeback tour. He just moved, with zero ego, with every ounce of fire that once lit title fights around the globe. And in a sport where brand and boxer often blur, that kind of raw truth cuts deep. Nobody's denying Canelo's elite. His resume speaks louder than any commentator ever could. But what Manny did, intentionally or not, was peel back the curtain. He reminded everyone of the soul behind the sweat. The part of boxing you can't monetize, can't schedule, can't script. Just feel, just live. Suddenly, it wasn't about who Canelo fights next. It was about whether the fire still burns as hot. Because in 30 seconds, Pacquiao didn't call anyone out. He called everyone in. He made fans, critics, and champions look inward, including the one man who's defined this era. And maybe that's the brilliance of it, not what Pacquiao did, but what came after. He never said Canelo's name, never trained beside him, never stood near him. All he did was exist, moved like he had unfinished business, sweated like the title was on the line. And suddenly Canelo was part of the story, whether he wanted to be or not. Because this is what happens when legacy doesn't sit still in the past, it breathes in the now. Pacquiao didn't just remind us who he was, and he proved he still is. Greatness doesn't retire, it evolves. Canelo's journey has been one of silencing doubts, unifying belts, outlasting legends, but now he's being measured against a ghost. Not a comeback, not a headline, a presence, a standard. That clip didn't shift rankings, it shifted atmosphere. And in that sudden shift, Canelo's silence didn't read like humility, it felt like reverence. Because when you witness a man chase perfection not because he has to, but because he still wants to, it hits different. Pacquiao didn't need to prove anything, yet somehow he proved everything. That clip cut through time, and in its wake, Canelo didn't feel smaller, he felt human, not dethroned, just paused, humbled, not by loss, but by legacy. Because when greatness returns, sometimes the right response is no response at all, just presence, stillness, and a shared understanding only fighters carry. That's why when fans imagined what Canelo said after that moment, maybe they were wrong, because maybe he didn't say anything, he just listened. Canelo might never speak on it, and honestly, he doesn't have to. His body of work is already carved into the DNA of modern boxing. But now, woven into that tapestry is a quiet echo from a 46-year-old who never really left. Not to reclaim a throne, not to throw shade, but to remind in this sport, greatness isn't always about dominance, it's about who still shows up when the crowd's gone. And Pacquiao showed up, just once, just enough. And the entire sport held its breath. Even Canelo, the undisputed king of this era, paused, not out of fear, not out of challenge, but out of something far more rare, recognition. Because what Pac gave wasn't a performance, it was a truth. A truth that peeled back the glitz, the promos, the press conferences, and took boxing back to where it started. In the rhythm, in the sweat, in the silence after the last round. Canelo didn't need to react, because in that moment, the spotlight shifted without a sound, and that silence, that was the real story.